this, and then peer pressure brought the rest of you along. I'm just kidding. I'm so glad that you're here. We've been working our way through a series, and in the series, it's kind of funny that people have been coming to me saying, you know, I really didn't like this series because I didn't really think, someone said to me just yesterday, they said, well, you keep saying where are we going to be in 5 years? And they said, my main goal for 5 years is to be alive. I'm not going to tell you how old this person is, but they're very, very old. But they're like, I just want to be alive. Yeah, that's a good goal. Life is good. And some people are like, you know what, I just don't want to be who I am right now in 5 years. And if I'm going to change this, I got to do some significant things. And so that's what we've been working through, is trying to look at ourselves. Where would we be in 5 years if we kept doing what we're doing right now? And we know that can be challenging for us, because how many know that change is hard? I mean, everybody, if we could change, we would all have tons of money in the bank. We would all be skinny. We'd all have perfect marriages. Everything would be hunky-dory. Is that a thing? Do people still say hunky-dory? Or did I just show how old I really am? It's like everything is hunky-dory. Like, so, but you know, I think we have this way about us that we really are resistant to change. And the truth is this: we all say that a lot of us will say, well, I'm fine with change. But we're fine with change until it's something that we don't want to change. We had an example about that last week, but I won't point it out to anybody again. But it was Denis. And so I just want to do a bit of a review. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to do a bit of a review for the last 4 weeks. And then we're going to talk about really the most important part of this. Because how many know that we don't know what life is going to bring to us in 5 years? You could be married now, you could lose a spouse in the next 5 years, and that changes everything. Things could be really great for you right now. I would really encourage everybody to next Sunday, next week, during our service, we're going to be doing an interview with some surprise guests, and I can't tell you who they are. But I just want to encourage you that you do not want to miss next Sunday. They have a story of faith, a story of hope, a story of perseverance. And I would really, really encourage you to make next Sunday a plan to be here. And you will, and if you're not here, I'm not going to videotape it and put it online so you can see it. No, just kidding, that's too good. But week 1, we asked the question, who? Who do you want to be in 5 years? And am I going to be that person if I keep heading how I'm going right now? And we said this, we said the life, if we keep doing what we're doing right now, this is going to be the life we get stuck with. We're not going to magically change without making an effort and letting God work in our lives. We don't just, if we're anxious today, we're not going to wake up in 5 years just magically less anxious. If you're broke today, you're not going to wake up in 5 years less broke unless you make changes. And if you don't make those changes, and the series has been very, very practical. You know, this is the things we could do, these small things. But really, the whole idea of it is very spiritual. Just submitting our lives to God, letting Him speak to us, and doing the things that He asks us to do. We said in week 1, we said the ways that you let in are the ways that you are set in. The things that you let into your life, the things that you watch, the things that you hear, and you let those things in, they become the way that you're set in. And how many know that we can all be set in our ways? We said 2 things. We said time is not on your side. Time is not on your side. You think, oh man, I got lots of time. I'm 15 years old, or I'm 20 years old, or I'm 44 years old. I got tons of time. Time is not on your side. A young family this week in Halifax, 7 children died in a fire. Their whole life ahead of them. Time is not on your side. The second thing we said is that future you is an exaggerated version of current you. Future you is an exaggerated version of current you. Meaning you're just going to be an exaggerated version of yourself. When I was 15, I wasn't this fat. I'm an exaggerated version of myself. Week 2. In the second week of the series, we asked the question, why? Why is it so difficult to change? And we talked about it's hard to change when we don't have a crisis. But crisis often causes us to change. And we talked, remember we had bricks and water and apples, and remember we had a whole bunch of things. But we talked about inertia, and how inertia actually means lazy. An object in motion will stay in motion, but an object at rest will stay at rest. And the reason why most of us don't change, if we're honest, we're lazy. We don't want to put the work, the time, or the energy in it. What we want is we want God to zap us and just change it. I know somebody who has an addiction to pornography, and their belief is simply that. I don't have to work on this. God's just going to take it away. That's lazy. And we got to do 3 things. If we really want to change, we really need to take drastic action. We talked about that. Drastic action. Maybe there's people that you need to delete their phone number. Maybe someone you need to break up with. Maybe not if you're married, but maybe someone you need to break up with or end or imagine. Troy told me. And we need to really change something, and it's going to take drastic action. Number 2 we need to do is make steady progression. Just be committed over a long period of time to make steady progression. And if we can take drastic action, do steady progression, then we will eventually enjoy momentum. When we do things over and over a long period of time, we will gain momentum in our life. Week 3. We asked the question, how? How are we going to change? And the answer to that question is we're going to change little by little. I mean, everyone in this room probably, most everybody, has been like, you know what, I want to change this, or I want to start reading the Bible more, or I want to do this. And we're like, I'm going to read the Bible, the whole Bible in a month. Well, no, you're not. But if you take this sheet home with you, and every time you read a chapter in the Bible, you tick it off, just it takes you 5 days to read one chapter. You just tick it off. Eventually, if you're consistent over a long period of time, it might take you a year, 2 years, 3 years. But eventually, you're going to read the whole Bible. And we can do it little by little. And one of the things we learned is if we're going to make goals, we need to make our goals they're so small that we can't fail, that we have to succeed at them. We talked about the Israelites walking in the wilderness. And how it's a picture of us, of so many of us who have a saved soul but a wasted life. We need to change little by little. And we listed 4 things that will help us, and I would encourage you to write these down, and I've been working through these myself. Number 1 is choose carefully. Not all change is created equally. Choose what you feel God wants you to change really, really carefully. Number 2, spell it out specifically. Be very, very specific. Don't say things like, well, I'm going to eat better. Better than what? I'm going to eat, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to eat better, and this is how I'm going to do it. And then you need to track it diligently. Professionals say that when you track things, when you keep score, you inevitably just become better at doing what you're wanting to do. So track it diligently. And then number 4 is guard it aggressively. Meaning, make sure that you don't miss 2 of whatever you're trying to change. If you miss 1 day, it's going to happen. If you want to read a chapter a day, that's great. But if you miss 1 day, guard it aggressively. Don't miss 2 days. Because that's going to create us back into this being lazy. It was really important. It was a phrase that we wrote down that really stuck out to me. Was maintain God. We need to maintain what God helps you obtain. And that's why it's important to take things little by little. Because as we take them, God gives them to us, and then we need to maintain it. And that's really important. Week 4. When are we going to find time to change? And that was the question I kept getting from people. Yeah, but when am I going to find time? I'm so busy, I'm so this, I'm so that. When am I going to find time? And last week, if we could just get Roger to bring up the board. Last week we laid out the day. And we said, often people will say, I want to change, but I want to do it between 8 in the morning and 5 in the evening, because that's the day. And what we talked about last week, which pained me greatly to talk about, is that's the time of our day that we have the least amount of control of. When I get here in the morning, I can have things planned out for the day, but then phone calls start and things happen. And it's the same thing when you go to work, when the kids wake up, whatever happens, you lose control of your day between 8:30 and 5:30. So what we talked about last week was really to make time between 5:30 when you're done work and whenever you wake up in the morning, because that's the time that you control the most. If you're a parent and your kids stay up till 11 o'clock at night and they're 10 years old, you're the parent. You need to get your kids to bed. You need to control your evening. And we can bring the most change in our life if we concentrate, I believe, from evening until morning. And we talked about a few things in there. Number one is you need to make sure that you're getting 8 hours of sleep. Most of our problems can be, or a lot of our problems can be traced back to not sleeping well. Nobody makes good decisions when you're not sleeping well. You need to sleep well. And there's people say, yeah, I can operate on 5 hours. No, you can't. Studies show that if you get 4 hours less sleep on any given night, doing whatever you do the next day is like doing it the equivalent after drinking 6 beer. Just by losing 4 hours of sleep. So if you normally get 8 and you get 5, it's like getting in the car, drinking 6 beer, and then trying to drive to Fredericton. It's like trying to think through some problems at work after you've had 6 beer. And some of you might be thinking, I do my best thinking after 6 beer. No, you don't. No, you don't. But it's really important to get sleep. You got to figure out the first thing. If I wake up at 6 in the morning, I got to go to bed at what time to get sleep? To get 8 hours sleep. Actually, overachievers, people that are richer, that succeed in life, they actually get an average of 8 hours and 36 minutes of sleep. They actually sleep longer. Now that we could get behind. But we talked about that last week, about getting sleep. And then we talked about 3 things that are of absolute importance. Number 2 was to go deep. You need to figure out in your life here. I need to figure out in my life here. When am I going to go deep? Number 1, spiritually. When am I going to carve out time to be still and know that He is God? When? One thing that becomes very tiresome, I think it does to me for sure, but I'm sure it does to God, is people who come to God or come to me and say, oh, Pastor Troy, I just feel like I'm not doing well spiritually. Except for they try to eat their only spiritual meal on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. I mean, it wouldn't work any other way. Even if you ate all of your meals, your physical meals, on Monday, you just ate 21 meals all at once, you'd be stuffed. But by Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, you'd be like, I'm hungry again. Because that's how our bodies are designed, but that's how our spiritual self is designed. We need to be eating of His Word and praying every single day. We need to find out, when are we going to go deep spiritually? We talked about it, and studies show that the best time, this did not make me feel happy, but the best time to do that is in the morning. Now, and if you do it at night, as long as you're doing it, but the studies show us that to go deep, it's really best in the morning. To go deep spiritually. And then the second is to go deep physically. To do some exercise, to get your heart rate up, to go deep physically. And it was funny because this week we talked about this last Sunday and people were tagging me on posts on Facebook. We did this, we did this, we did this. But we need to go deep physically every single day. Number 3, we need to go deep creatively. What is your passions? What are your hobbies? What are the things that you love? And people will tell me all the time, well, I love golfing. I'll say, hey, when's the last time you golfed? 4 years ago. Last year, my wife, for Father's Day, she bought me, I think it was 10 rounds of golf, like 9 holes of golf. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is the best gift ever. And I went golfing once. Now, I punched 2 of the holes because I brought somebody with me and paid for them. Once. But we'll say, I love golf, except for we don't exercise the passion and the creativity in our hearts that God gives us. Or maybe you need to read more or write more. But find time in your life to go deep. Spiritually, physically, and creatively. And really, the best time to do those things. We were talking last week about when you work out. This is from reading, not experience. But we got to change that. But what I'm saying is, it's like Ritalin and Prozac is released in your body naturally. Naturally. And we should really do that in the morning, because then it lets us have those effects in our life while we're awake, not while we're sleeping. And this week we're going to look at the what. And not what changes, because only you can decide that in your own heart. When you talk to God, what does God want you to change? But what we're going to talk about is what if. What if things don't change? If I could only change one thing, what should it be? What do I do if my 5-year plan doesn't go as planned? And we've all had that happen, where we make these plans and they don't go as planned. What if the plans fail? Or what if life just happens differently than I thought it would? What if I plan to have the best marriage in the world and tragedy strikes? Then what? What if I plan this and it doesn't work out? What if I plan something with my work and I end up losing my job? What if? And I want to look at a passage in Scripture, and it's quite a common, if you've been in church any period of time, you've probably heard somebody talk about this. But I want to just look at a passage today, because over the next 5 years, we can really move and see change in our life. But what if? What's the most important thing to have at the end of 5 years? It's found in Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. And in verse 38. Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Says this. It says, Jesus and his disciples were on their way. He came to a village where a woman named Martha opened up her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Haven't we all done that? I mean, spouses do it all the time. I'm going to leave that right there. Verse 41, Martha, Martha. Jesus says, Martha, Martha. The Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. If Mary has chosen what is better, let it not be taken away from her. As we think about this series, you can picture your mind when we talked about the dominoes, about starting with small change and having it affect big change over a long period of time. We talked about momentum in the oranges, about compound interest when we folded the paper. I want to encourage the parents, if you're in this room and you're a parent, I want you to just understand the importance that your life is to your children. Not just that you give them a place to eat and food. And often, sometimes Noah will say, Dad, are you going to pay me for this? I said, absolutely. With food and with the bed. I want to encourage you that the role you play in your children's spiritual formation, little by little. If you could just imagine, if we took that as our very most important thing of how we raised our children, where would we be? Where would they be in 5 years and 25 years? In Deuteronomy 11:18, it says this, place these words on your heart, get them deep inside of you, tie them on your hands and your forehead as a reminder, teach them to your children. Talk about them wherever you are. Sitting at home or walking in the street. Talk about them from time to time, from the time you get up in the morning until the time you go to bed at night. Inscribe them on the doorpost and the gates of the cities or in your house, so you will live long and your children with you. Little by little. Our children's faith is built little by little. The Bible says that if we were to harm a little child, that we might as well have a big rock tied around our neck and thrown into the water. And we need to understand that as parents, it is our responsibility to lead our children in faith and lead them towards Christ. And if we don't do that, if we ignore that responsibility that God has placed on us, that rock and that water is just as much for us. I love the story of Mary and Martha. I mean, I've heard it so many times. And I think that I appreciate it so much because I see myself in Martha. I spend a lot of time in my life focusing on what I'm doing for Jesus versus focusing on Jesus himself. We need to know today that those two things are not the same. That focusing what I do for Jesus is not the same as focusing my attention on Jesus. That going to church and giving Jesus an hour and a half on a Sunday morning is not the same as giving your life to Jesus. Those are not the same things. But I see myself in her. Because I can get caught up in what I do for Jesus. Well, I did a good deed or I did this. But focusing myself on him, they are not the same thing. I've let myself get distracted far too easily, as many of us have. I see myself in her, and the truth is, when I see myself in her, sometimes it bothers me. Some people said this, the sins that we struggle with are the sins that we find ugliest in other people. So sometimes I'll see people doing this. They'll put Jesus to the side, but just do enough to make themselves feel good. And that frustrates me. And then God will return my heart and say, Troy, you do the same thing. You get so tied up with, is the sound going to be perfect today? Is the video going to be perfect today? You think that those are the things that I'm happy about? I want you to pay attention to me. So in this story, I read it and I'm like, Martha, you're the worst. Then inside I hang my head in shame. But when we read it, we think, Martha, why are you so mad? I love stories in the Bible. Some stories in the Bible, they go on for chapters and chapters and chapters. And I can get distracted easily. But I love the stories in the Bible that are just so short, but there's so much information. We read it and we're just wondering, why are you so mad? What happened? I mean, it seems like she's excited to have Jesus come into her home. And then all of a sudden she comes into the living room. She's not happy, and it's like not really, but it's like she takes the mic away from him. Says, Mary, you're not helping me. But I love Jesus' response. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get frustrated with her. Because that's not who he is. Unless you're a religious person, and then he gets really angry and really frustrated with you lots for some reason in the Bible. But he just speaks tenderly to her and he corrects her. Even that is convicting to me. He says, Martha, Martha. Some translations says, oh, dear Martha. He doesn't get mad, he doesn't get frustrated, but he corrects her. He says, Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much, it says in the Message, and getting yourself worked up over nothing. In my experience, that's not something you should say to a woman, but I'm not here to judge Jesus, that's what he said. He says only one thing is essential, and Mary has chosen it. In the Message it says it's the main course, and it won't be taken away from her. Mary chose the one thing. And I love in the Message how it calls it the main course. It's the meat and potatoes, or the sushi, if you will. It's the part that really brings the satisfaction and the nutrients for the day. That he and that relationship with him and her are what's most important. Mary chose to sit at his feet, and he and that could not be taken away from her. What she learned that day could never be, even if the 5-year plan fell apart, that relationship would never be taken away. So that's the title today, What Can't Be Taken Away. Here's the summary of this message in one sentence. We focus on what can't be taken away, so that if our plans fail, our relationship with Jesus is stronger, no matter what else has been taken away. So we're looking at Mary specifically. I mean, we're looking at the whole story, but we're looking at her right now. And we're looking at how she chose to sit at Jesus' feet. And our first point today is this: choose it. You need to make a choice. Are you going to sit at his feet every single day? Are you going to choose it and listen to Jesus? There's a lot of things that the text doesn't say, and we can't fill in those blanks. We don't know a lot of the backstory of why this tension was here. I mean, maybe Mary already did her list. Maybe she was just not a procrastinator. We don't know. But we do know that all of a sudden Martha is mad because Mary's just sitting there. Or maybe Mary didn't do her part of the job. We don't know. Regardless of the situation, Mary chose to sit with Jesus. That even though life was busy around her, she chose to sit with him. It didn't matter that there was food to prep and dishes to do and guests to entertain. She made a choice to sit with him. And we are faced with that choice every single day. Are we going to, number one, make a choice to sit at Jesus' feet? What we need to understand is this was a very controversial thing back then. Because back in those days, women were not invited to be disciples. And basically, if you were sitting at someone's feet, at a rabbi's feet, you were showing that you were their disciple and you were learning from them. And so in those days, it was very unusual for a woman to be sitting at someone's feet and learning. Because you were just positioning yourself in a position to learn. And so there would have been tension around this. It was very strange for a teacher to accept a woman as a disciple. So this is already in a very interesting situation on this day, but I want to take a moment today. I want to make note that through the Bible that Jesus always elevated women. That he didn't say to her, this is the room for the men. He taught her because he was elevating her. And he places a high value on women all through Scripture because we are created in his image, and he loves and he values both men and women. Jesus always advanced women. There was this one time Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman, and the disciples came up to him and saw him talking to women, and the Bible said that they were surprised. They were just surprised he was talking to a woman and talking to a Samaritan. There was this another time where this woman had severe bleeding for 12 years. She had tried everything. She had spent all her money to be healed. But she went and she had to touch Jesus. And he turns to her and he says, "It's your faith that healed you." He turned around in a huge crowd where people were bumping and trying to get to him. And he knew right away that somebody had touched him. And he says, "Your faith has healed you." And he was talking to this woman. An amazing thing. He's talking to a stranger in a crowd. And when he turns and sees her, he says, "My daughter." He takes a stranger and he elevates her to his daughter. So I've become incredibly exhausted in the last few years about people just saying that women in ministry and all of those things. Jesus was always elevating, so Mary chose to sit at his feet. Now, the word meaning choose means to select from a number of possibilities or to pick according to a preference. That you prefer or you decide to do this instead of that. Mary was choosing Jesus. Now, I don't know if Mary was necessarily lazy. That's the impression that I kind of get from Martha. But we don't know that. But we know that she makes a choice. I think sometimes she gets the rap because Martha was working really hard and Mary was sitting there, and we think that maybe she was lazy. We don't know the back part of the story. But the idea is the same, is that she made a choice to choose to be with Jesus. Can you imagine if every single day, every mom or woman in this room made a decision to put everything that had to be done at home to spend time with Jesus first? Can you imagine that every dad said, when I get home or in the morning, before I do anything in this house, I'm going to put Jesus first? Can you imagine at the end of every day, if a husband and a wife or a woman or a man made a decision that before they went to bed that day, that before they did anything, they would put Jesus first? She just made a choice. She prioritized what was important. I mean, a lot of us can feel like there's a lot to do, whether you're a man or a woman. And there is lots of things to do. We all have things to do. I'm not saying women have more things to do than men, but women have more things to do than men. Most mornings I wake up, I go to work. I could work for 5 hours, for 10 hours, for 15 hours, whatever it is for that day. And when I go home, the truth is, that's it. My wife goes to work, and she comes home. So I'm not trying to say women have more to do than men, but women have more to do than men. Can I get an amen? Amen. That was very eager. Thank you. But no matter what position you find yourself in life, are you willing to prioritize Jesus above all else? Even if the dishes don't get done, or the car misses its appointment. It's a fight every day to put Jesus first. But if we do, that's something that no matter what the next 5 years holds, that can never be taken away. We can think we have dishes or cleaning or to take care of everything, but Jesus needs to be first and foremost. Or we think we got to get up and start the calls, start the emails, or whatever we got to do. What we need to understand is Martha was not wrong in making the meal. Someone's got to cook. Someone's got to clean. Someone's got to do those things. There was guests coming. It wasn't wrong to make the meal, and it wasn't marked wrong. And it isn't wrong to do all of those things. But remember this, Martha did a good thing, but she did it at the wrong time. She did a good thing, but she did it at the wrong time. We can all do that. Have you ever done a good thing at the wrong time? When you know you need to have a conversation with someone, but you know that it's a good thing, but you do it at the wrong time? See, but she was just putting, when Jesus was there, the most important thing was to be with him. She was putting emphasis on the preparation, not who she was preparing for. She was putting the emphasis on doing things for Jesus instead of spending time with Jesus. And those are not the same. It's easy for us. You can come to Grace, you can serve on a team, you can be involved in church. We can do things for God, but it's so easy to get caught up on doing things for him, and we forget him. We have to remember, we have to fight and we have to focus to keep Jesus the center. Here's a confession for you. I struggle, you're going to be like, no kidding. I struggle sometimes to focus. And reading the Bible can be difficult because my mind, just like your mind, gets distracted by a million things. Or sometimes I read the Bible and I read it and I don't understand it. How many know that's frustrating? And then I just say, oh, I'm going to skip to something else, I'll skip to something else, skip to something else. But the truth is, we can get so tied up with just doing things that we focus on what it really is to sit at his feet. But sometimes what is Jesus trying to say to me? Sometimes when I'm getting distracted, I sit down, I've said this before, I'll sit down with a small passage of scripture and I'll just read it over and over and over and over. Because the enemy of our soul wants us to be distracted, and I'll read it until God speaks to me. And we get frustrated. It's like, I've been reading the same 10 verses for 4 days. So what? We can get so wrapped up, I got to read 5 chapters a day or 10. Just read until he speaks to you. And if you don't understand it, read it again. I read the same book of the Bible for a whole month. I'll read Philippians and I'll just start, and when I'm done, I'll just start over. And I start over, and I start over, and I start over. Because I need God to speak to me. And if I leave it to myself, I just get distracted and I jump around with seemingly no plan. But I need to get to a place, I want to get to a place that whenever I open God's Word, I'm excited for him to speak to me. What is God going to say to me in his Word today? What is God going to teach me? So that's why I stay in a book, why I read it over and over. That's why I pray before I read and I pray after I read. You've got to make a choice. Am I going to know about Jesus, or am I going to know Jesus? Am I going to get so busy with just doing things, or am I going to spend time at his feet? So today it's only 2 points. Number 1 is you've got to choose it. You've got to make a choice to spend time with him every single day. And number 2, you've got to do it. Mary sat before the Master. It says in the message, she was hanging on every word he said. I mean, I love this so much. She just didn't choose it. She did it. Now this is us. Yes, spending time with Jesus is a good idea. I really should sit at his feet every day, and I should do it. But then we don't. She didn't just choose it, she did it. That might sound incredibly simple to you and to me. But she did it with all her heart. I love this idea that she sat and she listened and she hung on every word that he says. How many wives have ever noticed it doesn't seem like your husband listens to you? The other day my wife walked into the room and she said, "You never listen to anything I say." And I thought, that's a weird way to start a conversation. You'll get that later, it's a joke. Because she said other things and I didn't hear, forget it. But she hung on every word Jesus said. She had ears that were listening. She was listening with her ears and with her heart and with her soul. As we read the Bible, it come to find out that many people can listen to Jesus, but not hear him. We see in the Bible Jesus does awesome things, and there's religious people around him all the time. But they don't hear him. We see it all through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That he talks and he shows the religious people, the Pharisees, all of these miracles. And we hear stories when the guy was put down through the roof to Jesus, there was Pharisees there and they were thinking things, and Jesus knew what they were thinking. So I need you to remember this. The Pharisees heard what Jesus said, but it did not change their hearts. Proximity, or just being close by Jesus, is not enough. Going to church is not enough. The Pharisees followed him just like the disciples. They heard and saw the same miracles. Proximity is not enough. Mary and Martha, they were all in the house. They were all in the same room. They're not in a 100-story mansion. The sisters were close by. But Mary was not only close to him, she listened. She hung on every word that he said. Proximity is not enough. You can be in church for 10 years, but unless you surrender your heart and listen to his voice, it is not enough. You will have the same struggles, the same temptations. You will give in to the same things because it's not about proximity. In Mark chapter 3, there's this one time Jesus was in church, and there was a man who had a crippled hand. He basically had no strength. He was crippled, and the religious leaders, they're looking at Jesus and they're trying to find fault in him. They're not hanging on his word, they're trying to find fault in him. They were there, they were close, but they weren't listening. They wanted to find fault in what he was doing. And then they see the crippled man, and it's like they're scheming. They're like, oh, he's going to heal that guy. We're going to watch this closely. And the religious leaders watched him closely because they were trying to trap him so they could blame him, so that they could kill him. They saw Jesus face to face. They've seen him throughout the Gospels. And you can just picture these guys watching. Everything Jesus was doing, Jesus was right before them, but they couldn't see him. Mary was at his feet, hanging on every word. As a church, I just want to encourage you that we're a church, we take risks. We do crazy things. We want to see people's lives changed, marriages restored, and families changed. We believe that people's lives are changed because of Jesus. But I want to encourage you today to be at a place in your life where you're looking at Jesus, not in criticism, but in wonder. They are not looking at his church to be critical, but at his bride. I just picture Jesus. The disciples are there, and I want to believe that if I was there, would I be on my knees listening to him, just saying, tell me everything, talk to me, teach me. But here the religious leaders are in Mark chapter 3. They're seeing him, but they don't know him. And we need to know that it's a very fine line, and it's a scary place to be near the things of God, to be near truth, to be near Jesus, but to not know him. And if you're here today, and you are near to him, but you don't know him, you need to make your life right with him. Because the Bible tells us that one day he will say, I did not know you. May it not be so with me. May I not be near him, but not know him. May it not be this with Grace Church. May we see Jesus. May we watch him closely, not like the religious leaders, but like Mary, who sat at his feet, hanging on every word. Every word that he says, to let his words set the pace for our life. In Acts chapter 4:13, Peter and John healed a crippled man. And they were put on trial, and they spoke to the religious leaders, and this is what it says in Acts 4:13. When they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated common men. They saw the boldness of Peter and John, and they saw that they were uneducated and just common men. So they weren't that smart. They were astonished, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus. They're not that smart. They don't have a lot of education. But look what they're doing. Look at their boldness. They had been with Jesus. And I love that. I don't know what your goals are for the next 5 years. I don't know if you want to go back to school, if you want to learn a different language, or if you want to run a marathon. But these two men, they're uneducated. Maybe they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. But they had been with Jesus. And what I want to propose to you today, to this church, to me today, is whatever your 5 goals are, search them out with God. I'll tell you, please plan, be inspired, be creative. Feel like God is leading you for the next 5 years. But elevate one thing above everything. To sitting at his feet every single day. Because no matter what life brings you, nothing could ever take that away. Maybe you want to learn a new language or put on a squirrel suit and fly out of an airplane. Which I'm not really sure why anybody would jump out of a perfectly good airplane. My prayer is for the next 5 years that we would be planted and flourishing and growing. That the windows of heaven would pour out. That your dreams that you never thought would ever happen, that God would bring them alive in your heart. But on the other side of the same thing, that even if life looks very different in 5 years, maybe your vision for your marriage would look very different. My prayer is that if your life doesn't go as planned, that no one would ever be able to take away the relationship with Jesus that you built. We're starting a series in a few weeks, and it's called Dear Church. And we're going to be looking on the 7 letters that were written in Revelation to the churches in chapters 2 and 3. Dear Church. This series is going to be 8 weeks long. And we're going to be looking at all 7 of these letters, one every week. What was being said to them? What does it say to us? And there's 7. On week 8, we're going to be reading a letter that I believe God has given us for Grace Church. Dear Grace Church, I would ask you to really be thinking and praying about this. Because I believe God is calling us to things that are going to take some risks. That's going to call us to deeper things, to realizing that just being someone who has a proximity to Jesus is not going to be enough for us. My prayer is really that this series makes us feel incredibly uncomfortable with what we have turned Christianity into. So this morning, and just as we're going to just worship together in a moment, but just before we do that, I said that we were going to talk about how we would do this, and I would encourage everybody to have a piece of paper or take out your phone. And over this last 5 weeks, if God has been speaking to you, and so for me, God has been really speaking to me specifically about this time period in my day. Basically, my day is very out of control a lot of days in here, but God has really been speaking to me here about 3 things in this time zone. Is what am I going to do to go deep, spiritually, physically, and creatively in this time spot? And so, for me, this is just a way. You say, well, what do you mean? You're talking about the first week, you talked about drastic action. This is pretty drastic action because I'm about to tell 150 people what I'm going to do here. And so, you might ask me and I'll have to say yes or no. But what I would encourage you to do is everybody to get a calendar. If you're looking to really make changes in your life, to get a calendar, this is not drawn to scale, of course, but I would get a calendar. This is what I'm going to do. Okay? In a real calendar, there's 7 days in a week. Okay? My drawing skills are not awesome. But to get a calendar, and whatever the 3 things that you want to change in your life, say there's 3 that you want to take small steps, I would encourage you, as we talked about, you need to write those down every day. If you did it, you need to check it off, because we are capable of deceiving ourselves. We'll say, oh yeah, I did this yesterday when it could have been 4 days ago. To write it down, every day you do it and every day you don't do it, and absolutely try your best not to miss 2 days in a row. So for me, I have built into my life times that I read the Bible and pray, but what I'm looking to do, in addition to that, is in the morning, I'm looking to 15 minutes of reading the Bible in the morning. Okay, I do it other times during the day, but I'm adding an additional 15 minutes in the morning. Okay, so if you don't read the Bible at all, okay, I would encourage you to set a goal that's small, that's manageable, even if it's 5 verses. Floss 1 tooth. You remember that. Set a goal that you can manage. So for me, that means I'm going to get up earlier because I need to do 3 things in the morning. Okay, so I'm going to spend 15 minutes reading Bible. Okay. Number 2, I'm going to work out 15 minutes. You say only 15 minutes? Yeah. That's where I'm going to start. Because if I say an hour, it's not going to happen. So every day, okay, 15 minutes. You can ask if you like. Number 3, I really struggle with this because creatively, I'm not that creative. But I am going to read, because I'm not a good reader, so I don't read a lot. I'm going to read, I'm not going to read a book I'm going to read a certain type of book that's going to help me creatively for 15 minutes. So that means I have 45 minutes that I need to, now I have kids that go to school that I have to drive to school, so I'm going to have to significantly alter what I do in the morning to make this happen. Yeah. Okay, so on your paper, what are you going to do? Because one thing I've known, if we don't write it down, if we don't make a plan, if we don't have people help us, it's not going to happen. So for me, I'm going to start 15 minutes every week. Now I will say this, that this will be during the week, and on the weekends these things might happen a little later, you know, give me some grace here. But I've chosen very carefully what my 3 things are going to be, because not everything's created equally. So I've chosen very carefully. I've taken some time, and I don't have time today, but I've spelled those things out specifically. What they're going to look like, what I'm going to do, how long I'm going to do them, and how long before I increase to longer. So I've tried to spell it out as specifically as I can. I've made a commitment that I'm going to mark it down every single day. Okay, I'm going to track it diligently every day. I've also made a commitment on one fourth thing, and this is, I wasn't going to say this, but I will say it, is one thing that goes along with the workout. I'm going to track every single thing that I eat. Everything. Okay? So if we really want change, we need to choose carefully, spell it out specifically, track it diligently, and then I'm going to need to guard it aggressively. Meaning, if I do it today, and I miss, and I do it, and I miss here, I need to make sure I don't miss here. You got to guard it aggressively. If you want to quit smoking, if you want to change, you need to say, okay, I didn't smoke today. But I hear people say all the time, I've been quit. Someone told me numerous years ago, I quit smoking for 3 years. I only smoke on the weekends. We're capable of deception of ourselves, and I'm going to guard it aggressively. I've committed myself to get 8 hours sleep. We're sitting at home, and I love to stay up late. And the reason why I love to stay up late is because I don't have to get up too early in the morning, because Penny takes care of things. So I've made a commitment that I'm going to go to bed early, so that I can help her in the morning. And so the other night we're in Penny's like, I'm going to bed, and I turned off the TV. I'm like, I'm coming too. She's like, we got to make a commitment and guard it aggressively. I had one more thing that I wanted to say. I had one more 15-minute period I forgot to mention. 15 minutes. I don't want anyone to laugh at this. Okay, if you laugh, I'm throwing this marker at you. Okay? 15 minutes of housework. So, this is just a starting point. I'm just easing myself in. Okay? I'm just easing myself. Okay? You know what? I gotta get some new friends. I don't know what it's worth. Okay?
Penny's not laughing.
So those are my 4 things. What are your things? Just pull it down, that's okay. What are your 4 things? Or what are your 2 things? What are your 1 thing? Then you got to be like Mary. You've got to choose it and do it. You've got to choose, in closing, to spend time at His feet. And you've got to make sure you do these things. See, you in 5 years is just not a neat idea to talk about for 5 weeks. I'm really believing, and you're going to hear a story next week, I really believe that we could live a life that we don't even recognize in 5 years. But changes without committing to spending time at His feet. That will be just like Martha and ignore the most important thing. So what I would encourage you today, as we begin just to worship for the last few moments, to just write, to make commitment. That even if you're feeling in your heart that you feel cold or distant, make a decision today that I want to do this even if I don't feel like it. So we're going to worship together. Why don't you just let God speak to your heart today? God, don't let me get caught up like Martha. But let me listen to your voice like Mary. Let me hang on every word. Let me hang on every word today. What are you saying to me? God, speak to your people.